Well, then I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can you see that, Ian?
I can.
All right, good. I have to test things on you because no one else can speak.
Fair enough.
So good deal. So thank you, everyone who is watching. We're going to be speaking today with Ian Altman, and we'll get into introductions here in just a moment. But one of the things I wanted to make sure we touch on first is how you use some of this stuff. So if you're new to Zoom, you can ask questions via chat at the bottom of your platform right there. If you hear loud screaming children, that's thanks to the current crazy times we live in with everyone working from home. But if you want to ask a question, just jump into chat. You'll see Yoko CEO Lauren is in the webinar today. Enter the question you want to ask, press enter, and we'll basically fold your questions in as we go. That said, for those of you that aren't familiar with us, my name is Chris Yoko. I'm the CEO and founder of Yoko CO. We work exclusively with organizations that have a passion or purpose beyond profit, and we help them leverage their web presence to increase that impact, so to do good better. And I am super pumped to be able to introduce my guest today. Ian Altman is joining us. So Ian is a keynote speaker, he's an author, he's a podcast host, he's run multiple companies and grown them from startups to a value of over more than $1 billion. He is also personally a friend and a member of our advisory board, and I have learned so much from him, and I'm hoping if you can learn a fraction of what I have over the years from Ian in today's conversation, you'll be putting yourself in a really, really good spot. So Ian, welcome.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me here. And if everyone else learns a fraction of what you've learned, then they're getting shortchanged, I guess, is the answer.
Well, you know, they put the time in, they'll learn the full picture. But very cool. So obviously today we are going to talk, and we'll get to the main points of more of the discussion around alignment with our clients and our target audiences to really help increase value in a way, as you sign off the podcast, a way that everyone can appreciate. And what I was hoping to talk about is, considering we do have everything going on with coronavirus and everyone is working from home, is, you know, the economic realities and the business realities of the fact that people, you know, especially us in sales, still have goals. We're still trying to hit, you know, in some cases really specific numbers. In other cases, people just want to make sure the wheels of progress continue to move forward. And in times like these, I don't know if you've gotten all of the emails I've gotten, but almost everyone's been like, we're still open, please, for the love of God, buy something from us, slamming it down our throats. And clearly there's a right way, and I think a lot of wrong ways to handle the current situation. So I just hope to hear a couple of your thoughts around how people can begin to better align themselves, not only with their potential clientele or target audience, but just with the fact of the matter of these times.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think that, you know, we have to have a lot of empathy for just people who are listening into this webinar, and for our potential clients and our existing clients. And I think that sometimes what happens is we suffer from what I like to call axis displacement disorder. And that's where we believe the axis of the earth has shifted and the world now revolves around us. And so what happens is we think to ourselves, well, wait a minute, I don't care what's going on in the world, global pandemic or anything, I still have to hit my numbers. I still have to grow my business. So everyone else should just focus on buying my stuff. And it really doesn't work that way, because people have their own issues. And if you can all of a sudden shift your perspective to say, what do my clients need? How can I show some empathy and how can I help them? Then it works really well. There's a restaurant in the Washington, D.C. area called Clarity. It's in Vienna, Virginia. I know you've been there. I've been there. We've been there together. Amazing place. Absolutely. And the chef owner, John Kryn, actually spent years working at Booz Allen in their innovation group. And when all this pandemic started, John posted a video of him and a colleague making their own hand sanitizer with like some lavender fragrance and this and that they have in the restaurant.
Oh,
they removed, I forget what the percentage was, but a certain percentage of tables and chairs from the restaurant to have the right amount of social distancing and spacing out. And then they implemented some protocols to make it so that their servers had to wash their hands in between each table. And they would check in with each person, make sure they were feeling healthy, didn't have any symptoms when they came to work. And they have something where every day he posts something that says, here's a family meal that you can pick up and we'll deliver to you curbside if you're not going to come into the restaurant. So while most restaurants are struggling, all of a sudden he's thriving. My point is not that, gee, we should all go into the restaurant business because it's highly volatile, especially in these times. But if a restaurant can be that innovative and think about new ways to serve its customers, we can too. And to that end, you have to think about, what do your customers need now that more people are working remotely? What does that mean for your respective businesses? And there are different ways that we can adapt to that.
Absolutely. That's a great, yeah. I mean, it's using the times and addressing, and again, bringing yourself into alignment with what your audience needs. People still got to eat, and they still want to eat good food. And how do you make that happen in a way that people still can stay, socially distant, as it were, as opposed to emotionally distant?
Yeah. And the thing to think about that's interesting about what he's done and what they've done at Clarity is that they didn't say, oh, and you can order all this a la carte stuff off our menu. What he did is he had the foresight to say, okay, so now people whose kids were away at college are now back home. Their children are back home. Their activities are canceled, which means we're going to center this around family meals. So instead of going in and having to order for 8 individual entrees, it's like, hey, we're going to give you this focaccia pizza that historically their staff eats, that they make for them. And then here are these special menus that we have. You pick what you like for a family meal and how many people, and we deliver curbside for that number of people. So what he's done is he's reduced the friction and made it really simple. And the darn shame of it is that his restaurant isn't near where I live, or I would be there every day, but it was just fascinating. And we went there for dinner the other night, and I said, man, we're concerned, but we want to support your restaurant. We're coming in. And he put us in one of their private dining rooms. And there were 6 of us. And I think we went through about a quart of hand sanitizer, and we each washed our hands about 15 times. And we had a great meal. And everybody was like, people who used to hug and kiss each other when they saw each other were like kind of, so, and that was it. But it just, changed the dynamic a little bit.
You get the nod. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's, there's those kind of lessons that people can unpack for whatever their industry might be. I mean, we work with a lot of organizations that are, clearly B2B, but a lot of also that are, B2 patients or, associations with membership. And there's, I think, a similar opportunity to really align things with those needs in a very similar way as John did over at Clarity, where if you're an association, like everyone who puts off their CE and continuing education credits now has a lot of time on their hands and not a lot to do other than sit in front of a browser. But in terms of the communication, so finding a way to articulate that doesn't seem like it's capitalizing on a crisis, doesn't seem like it's panicked. What are some of the things people can do to just make sure they're coming across appropriately from a messaging and communication standpoint?
Well, it's an interesting thing because the idea is that you want to come across as authentic and genuine. And the easiest way to do that, and people should write this down, is to actually sincerely care about your clients and be authentic and genuine. So you can't manufacture it. So if your whole goal is, how can I extract the last dime out of these people, they're going to see you coming. But if you said to them, gee, if this is still important, how can I serve you? And the client says, well, what do you have in mind? I'll give you a perfect example. So a client of mine, I was scheduled to work with their team and deliver a keynote and a workshop for them in mid-April. That's not going to happen. They said, you know what? Our organization just made it so that everybody is working remotely. I said, okay, so what are your goals? Are you guys just going to put this stuff off? And they said, no, because our team needs to better understand how to sell when people are not face-to-face. Right. And we need to develop our skills. And candidly, our people have time to do that so that when things turn around, we're ready to go. And so because I asked the question, I then said, well, we've actually developed this platform called the Same Side Selling Academy, which we built with your team, Chris. So that we can about that. Yeah, so we can provide this level of training to your team. Let me show it to you, and you tell me, to my client, whether or not you think this would be a right fit for them. And she said, oh, this would be fantastic. Yeah, that's very much exactly what we're looking for. And then the interesting thing is I said, well, do you think that's going to be enough? Well, actually, what we also want is, how can we have regular interactions to role play and things like that? Well, we can use Zoom and we can do that with people remotely. And one of the people on their team said, well, but would that work? And I said, well, how are you planning to interact with your customers over the next several months? Because my guess is your team probably needs to develop familiarity and comfort with tools like Zoom, because they're probably going to be doing a lot more remotely than they will in person. And so the whole idea is that we're just serving their needs. Now, if they didn't need that, or if they said, hey, we're just hunkering down and we're going to go into a cave and come out in 6 months, you got to respect that too. And so there's different information and content that I'm going to be sharing with people for free that I guarantee people are going to see it and say, wow, that's really valuable content. You could charge for it. But I think fundamentally, you got to think about how are you serving other people? And, that old, karma boomerang will come around. And if it doesn't, well, you know what? You still do the right thing for other people.
Yeah. And I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of the more transactional, non-relationship oriented kind of organizations. Like, I mean, obviously there's going to be industry specific hits, but I feel like it's going to be a lot of those people that have the authentic care for their customers that whenever things come back around, they're going to be the ones people go to, because they're not the ones that, were like vultures descending from the sky trying to take any last nickel somebody has before things get shut down. And so one of the things that I think is interesting, we had a client ask us about this, was, my inbox is full of emails with this. If I did a word cloud of my subject lines in my emails, it's just COVID-19 is the giant block. And then maybe there's a couple other token words here. And so they were asking, what kind of message do we put out? I thought it made more sense just to be like, maybe be silent at this point. But what do you think about like the timing? Because obviously there is just a flood of information across all channels right now, and it's easy to get lost in it. Maybe right now it's best to be absent or silence, or maybe when does it make sense, do you think, for people to start reaching back out? Which, kind of falls in line with that balance. I think
it's interesting. And by the way, I think we should also let people know that for the people who are connected here live, they can feel free to post questions. So if there's specific things they were hoping to hear, they can post questions in the webinar, and that way we can address their specific questions, because why not tailor it to them if they'd like that? The thought that I have is this, is that right now, like a perfect example, in my same-site selling immersion program, we have a series of emails we send out as reminders. And so this weekend, when the one that went out yesterday came up, and so we have a process whereby we review it, I said, no, let's hold that message off. And so the message was, hey, I hope you and your family and the people you care about are safe. I know this can be trying times. So rather than give you specific instructions on things to do with same-site selling, just remember to, have a sense of humanity, reach out to your customers with empathy. So it was making it relevant, not in a way that's going to generate revenue for me,
right? But
instead showing them that, look, I have empathy for your situation, and we're all going through this together, and we'll all get through this together. And this is a time where people candidly just have to come together. It's like anytime I see something right now in social media where someone's blaming one political party or another, I said, that may be valid, but not today. So
now
give it a rest.
For that. Yeah.
Give it a rest. You can point fingers later. Right now we're trying to solve a problem. And I think that sort of model makes sense. So I think it's fine to say, look, amid this crisis, here are some resources we have that may be helpful for you. That's fine. If it's, hey, I know that we have this crisis right now, and at our conference, we were going to be giving away these hand sanitizers, and instead we're going to start selling them. That's not going to work. But if you said to people, look, I know it's difficult for people to get hand sanitizers right now, and so we've got some for this trade show coming up. I'm not going to send a case to anybody, but if you need some, let me know and we'll drop them in the mail to you. I know right now is a difficult time to do that, because people are saying, well, wait a minute, my business is struggling. I can't spend the money. You know what? If you can't send a package like that, then don't do it. But if you can, probably goes a long way that someone says, you know what? When things were tough, they took care of me. Our daughter is traveling and studying overseas right now. And all of a sudden her school's canceled,
right?
All that stuff. And she had to get back. And there's someone I know at United Airlines contacted her and said, hey, any advice on what I should do to change Rachel's flight schedule. And she said, as soon as you know the dates, let me know and I'll take care of it. And so she rerouted everything. She flies home tomorrow. And I said, what do you need from me? She said, nothing. I just hope she gets home safely without incident. And I was like, okay, you just bought yourself so much goodwill that,
Absolutely.
it's like, and they could have said, oh, it's an extra $500. It's an extra $1,000. And I would have paid whatever it was to get her home safely.
Absolutely.
They just said, we got her covered. And at Newark, we don't have control over how long it takes to go through immigration and customs. They're doing additional screening. I've put her on a much later flight, which she may not like because it's going to look like a 5-hour delay or layover, but we want to make sure that she doesn't have anxiety catching the flight. I'd rather she come out early and we move her to an earlier flight than have her scrambling and not catch her flight. And I was like, wow. And that just showed total empathy for the situation. Now, that's a B2C example, but in the B2B side, it comes down to any other businesses. Our friend Jenny Stippelman, who's a banker, sent out stuff to her clients and said, hey, if you own a business, here are new things that the Small Business Administration is doing with some of these new laws that have been passed. So she's not saying, here's how to do more business with me. She's just looking out for her clients, which gets people to say, oh, wow, this is a great person to do business with.
Absolutely. And there's a big part of that, like you said, I mean, I think a lot of it boils down to how authentic you truly are. And that's something you can't manufacture. But for those people that maybe aren't as authentic, like this is a great time to learn an important lesson and maybe, build some of that muscle up. Because there is there's the old saying, with I think it's Formula One, where you don't get fast by going fast in the slow parts. You go as fast as you can in the fast parts. And I mean, as we've seen, like even the Fed can't flip a switch and make the market change. So nothing, we do in our business is going to manufacture a market. So the best you can do is really try to make sure that you get through the trying times as well as possible. But whenever things rebound, you're going to have a better opportunity to, essentially go faster. You're going to be able to show your clients that you care about them, not only when there's new revenue on the line, which I think is an important thing to be able to demonstrate, but then also be able to show, kind of the depth of capability and thoughtfulness that you have as a person. I mean, it obviously comes down to the things that are really going to build up, I think, those stronger relationships are going to prove fruitful when things rebound and we start to get back to some sense.
And I will tell you also, Chris, that it's okay in these sorts of times where everyone's struggling to give a little bit more for your clients. So for example, there are clients of mine who said, hey, this event in March, this event in April, we're postponing till September or November. And so the first question I got was, well, so can we credit any of the fee that we've paid for this event in April towards that event in September? And I said, yeah, you can. In fact, you can credit all of it. Now, even though my agreement doesn't say that, my agreement says, oh, well, gee, you're changing it within 60 days, so you forfeit all of it. What I think to myself is, if I was them, what would I want to hear? And I said, yeah, we can take care of all of it. I said, in the meantime, would it be helpful if we did a webinar, if we did something that would be of value to your customers? Like, wow, we hadn't thought about that. That's great. How much would that be? It'd be nothing. Just if I can help you further engage with your customers. So I offered to do those things. And then the client wrote me back and said, hey, if you see Ian Altman fan club trending, it's from me, and anyone else who needs a speaker on this topic, you're my first go-to person. All because, think about it, if my schedule is more open now, I can be more generous with my time now. Like, and instead of how do I capitalize and make every last cent, think about how do I deliver more and more value, which is going to pay off down the road? Because this is not going to be a long-term problem. This is going to be a relatively short-term problem that resolves, and you want to be at the top of the list of those people when they're ready to do business.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes back to what we had originally planned on talking about today, which is that alignment. And how do you get yourself to a place where you are truly aligned with the organizations you're working with? Because obviously that's where you can not only have the most value, but you, this is a part of what you've helped teach me over the years, but is whenever we initially had, it was a discussion where you challenged me on why we did some of the work that we did back in like the end of 2014. And the big takeaway was like, oh, because we care about the impact these organizations have on the world. And we went back and we measured it. We saw the organizations we felt really well aligned with, we not only outperformed across all of our other clients comparatively, the ones that we didn't feel aligned with, we had performed more poorly. But according to the industry average across a slew of different industries, the ones we felt really well aligned with, we outperformed pretty significantly. And so there is that component of being able to use this as an opportunity to really determine what type of impact you want to have as an organization, what type of clientele you want to serve, and how you better align with them. Because with the organizations you're working with, like you said, what would I want to hear if I were in their shoes? And, I happen to know you pretty well. So I know that you care very, very deeply about the type of impact that you're going to have on that audience and the things that they're then going to radiate out and do. And so with some of the time we have left, I thought maybe we could do one or two things. You can choose which way you think we go. But is one, talking a little bit more about how to begin to build that alignment. And I'm certainly happy to share what it was like for me, but you've coached likely thousands and tens of thousands of people through a journey of their own to do that. Or on the other side, if we want to talk a little bit more around some of the tactical elements of being able to build that alignment and sell remotely. So what are some just, really tactical things people could use now? So,
and I think we can do a little bit of both. I mean, part of the idea is that, so in same side selling, Jack and I write about this idea of selling results and not resources. What I mean by that is very often people say to their clients, their billing and their work tends to be centered around hours and effort. And I promise everyone listening that never once has someone said, you know what I really want is I'm hoping someone can sell me 12.3 hours of someone's time. It doesn't happen. But what they say is, here's the result I'm looking for. And oftentimes people who aren't familiar with same side selling will say, well, but how do I find out what results they're looking for? And it's a simple thing. People should write this down, which is you ask. And so while you're talking to them, you say, well, what would be meaningful for us to measure at the end to know that this is successful? How are we going to know whether or not it's successful? It's interesting. Part of the Same Side Selling Academy is we have quizzes at the end of the core lessons because we want to make sure we can measure that people understood what was in the lesson. And so we said, okay, well, we need a way to have the ability for people to take a quiz at the end and verify this, and then see reporting to know who passed the quiz and who didn't pass the quiz. So the goal is not for someone to spend money and take the lessons. The goal is for them to learn the skills. And then we said, okay, well, the other thing we need to do, we need to make sure that people can practice these skills. Okay, well, how do we do that? Well, I know, let's build a tool so they can use it for practice and we can measure if they're using the tool. And it's a novel concept. So similarly, when you work with your clients, I know that your team and you were very disciplined in this and saying, what are we going to measure together? How many lives are going to be impacted if we get this thing right? What are we going to measure that isn't likes and clicks, because no one can deposit likes and clicks in a bank, but what are we actually measuring through the process? And it's not rocket science. It's just a matter of, if you ask those questions, then now there's a chance you can deliver it. If you don't ask those questions, the problem is you might think as a vendor, you did everything you needed to, and man, we were brilliant. And the client thinks to themselves, they did all this work, but I didn't get what I was looking for.
Right.
And now you spend a whole bunch of time delivering for the wrong objective. Instead of, if you know that up front, oftentimes in organizations, the sales organization and the people implementing it are not aligned. And what happens is sales sells one thing, the operational team executes something else, and the client is upset. Well, meanwhile, the developers are high-fiving saying, wow, we just developed this great thing. It's fantastic. This is awesome. And the client says, that isn't what I was looking for, because they didn't identify what success looks like. And the interesting thing is that the organizations that I work with, I'll often ask them, I'll say, okay, so if you have a choice of two different vendors, and one vendor is focused on who needs to sign off on the contract, and the other vendor is asking you questions about what does success look like and how are we going to measure results, which vendor would you rather work with? And people will usually say, well, I want the vendor who's focused on results. Okay, great. How much more would you be willing to spend to work with that vendor? And the interesting thing is everyone says, well, I don't know. I said, well, just pick a number. And the most common number is 20%. I don't know why. It just happens to be 20%.
There we go.
And then someone will inevitably say, well, I don't know if that's true. And I say, okay, let me ask it a different way. How much less would you have to pay for it to be a good deal, but you do not get the results that you need? And the answer is, I got to pay 100% less. It's like, it's never a good deal if I don't get the results that I need. It's, you know, it's almost like, gee, the house is on fire. Two different fire departments show up. And one guy says, look, I'll definitely put out the fire and save your family. It's going to cost X amount. The other one says, look, we're going to put in a good effort, but there's probably nothing we're going to accomplish. It doesn't matter how much the second one said they're going to charge. You're like, well, I don't think it's a good deal. Right?
Absolutely.
So the idea is that we need to make sure that we're focused on those results. Now, when I take this to a digital world, you know, what changes is nothing. It's the same thing. So it's still a matter of the discipline of, in a digital environment, saying, what does success look like? Because if I don't know what success looks like, there's a pretty good chance that you could be paying to not get the results that you need. And as soon as you say that, and they're looking at you and another vendor, if the other vendor didn't have that discussion about results, what goes through their mind is, well, how could the other person have given us a price if they didn't ask the question about what we're trying to achieve?
Yep. Absolutely. Well, and I think that also ties into, and I'll come back to another part of this in a moment, but whenever you think about it all happening remotely, is if you're bringing your organization and your offerings in alignment with your client, you are, you know, creating a certain impression, both of yourself as a person and as your on behalf of your organization. And what kind of things do you think could happen on, you know, a channel such as this, if we're on Zoom, we're doing a conference call, that begin to you know, so you can say all the right things and, you know, hey, here we want to be aligned, and you can be perfectly aligned. But if there are other things happening around you, what kind of things might erode or distract from,
well,
you know, that kind of messaging?
I think there are a few things. So first, you notice that on this session, you and I aren't like this on our phone and trying to hold it just right. And we've got fixed cameras. We have the right audio gear so that hopefully people will see that it sounds good, it looks good. That aspect that's really important to make sure that people have a quality experience. The other thing is that in this world where there are extenuating circumstances, and let's say you're working from home and you've got young kids who might come in or out of the room, pre-address that objection to say, hey, just want to let you know, I'm working out of the home office. I've got my kids on task, but they're younger kids. I just want to apologize in advance if they come in and interrupt. Now, if it's happening every 3 minutes, you got to figure out a way to solve that. And you got to work with your spouse or partner or whomever and say, hey, listen, I know we're both working at home. During this half-hour call, I need your help with this. Or you've got to come up with other methods. But people understand this kind of stuff happens. I work out of my home office. And now, granted, it was built specifically for doing studio work and things like that. So it's a little, you know, I think most people don't have a step and repeat on the wall in their house. But the idea is that you want to make sure that you're investing in the right type of gear, that you've got the right type of bandwidth so that the experience people will have is as good as it possibly can be. And if you're new to working on video, that you take the time to practice with colleagues and you get comfortable with it. So it's not like the first time you're doing it and all of a sudden you're having a meeting and the meeting is like this because you think the camera's here and it's really here. Or you're looking down here at the screen instead of up here at the camera. I mean, just little things like that will make a difference. And testing and making sure that the quality is good. And fortunately, there's technology out there nowadays that is dramatically less expensive and dramatically more affordable than it's ever been in the past. You know, in my prior businesses, we had offices around the world, and it would cost us thousands of dollars per month to have connectivity between our headquarters and our remote offices around the world. Thousands of dollars per location so we could have a video conference. And today, I can just hop online with my laptop without thousands of dollars per month, let alone thousands of dollars of equipment. I can do it with relatively low investment to have a really high quality experience. And if your competitors are doing this and you've got this type of experience, your professionalism comes through. And it doesn't mean you need to have a step and repeat and all this type of graphic stuff. It could just mean that you're conscious about where you're filming from. So when you're doing the session, you set it up so that there's a bookcase behind you and it's not all cluttered and messy. I've seen people where they have a bookcase behind them and it looks like a bomb went off, which could be appropriate in a pandemic, but I don't think so.
You want to give more of a calming a feel through your video presence. And that's, I mean, all of those are, yeah, absolutely just critical tips and things to really be mindful of, especially the pre-objection. Like, it's such an easy way to diffuse any situation, and people get so wound tight that nothing can go wrong on this call. And we're all human. Just lean into it. Hey man, we're all staying at home. We're staying safe. There's going to be some kids. They might barge in. If they do, I apologize. Like you said.
Yeah. I often joke that we have landscaping people that come to our house, and I've got soundproofing and everything in my office, and my office on the second floor of our house. And I can tell you that the landscaper runs the leaf blower right outside, one story down from my office, exactly 4 minutes after any podcast episode starts recording. That's his schedule. I think somehow they dial in, they're connected to when my podcast.
Like, I know you rescheduled this week, so I made sure to accommodate.
Exactly. And which also triggers the dog to bark in the house.
Of course.
And but the thing is that, I mean, the reality is in most cases people can't hear it. I use a dynamic microphone, and just as a technical piece, because I think this is valuable for people to know, one of the most popular microphones, and I don't want to assign the name to it because they make great products, but it's what's called a large capsule microphone, and it looks like a big standard, it's like a big cylinder microphone, and it is designed. That's probably a directional microphone.
This one is, but they look similar, yeah.
So the ones that have like a big screen around it are designed to pick up the most minuscule sound and capture it. A dynamic or directional microphone like what I'm using, which is this microphone. This is a Shure SM58. Give the people at Shure a shout out. The Shure SM58 is designed to capture what's right in front of it and nothing else. So just as an example, if I all of a sudden turn like this, you'll notice that the audio changes dramatically versus when I'm right at it, which means if a dog's barking outside, the leaf blower is going, it's probably not going to pick it up. It's also not going to pick up the sound of the fan on my computer. But if I had one of those large capsule microphones that sits on a desk, it would probably pick that up. And so the idea is that often people say, oh, so I should get that microphone. And ironically, the microphone I'm using probably costs less than the most popular microphone people would get, that for their purposes is not the right one. If you wanted to record a jazz trio and put one microphone in the middle of it, that microphone, this large capsule microphone, would be perfect for it. If you want to capture one person speaking directly in the microphone, you want one of these dynamic or hypercardioid microphones that captures the sound that's right in front of it and nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are just, easy things to do to, like you said, filter out a lot of the background noise, make sure that, whenever you are present, you can be fully present. I think that's one of the things a lot of people sometimes are not always mindful of is, on a conference call, like this, or especially if you're using Zoom or Hangouts, Skype or Microsoft Teams now.
Yep.
You can do a speaker view, which is what it defaults to. So most people are like, oh, the speaker's speaking, I don't have to be engaged. Some people are on gallery view, and just like if you're in a conference room, they see you whenever you're like, or you're ruffling around. So if you're going to be present, treat it like you're actually there. Be present, be in the room, lean in. And another one that I get a lot, and I'd be interested to see if you've run into this, is people that are just really camera shy. Like, we've got a couple of clients that, at first would refuse to turn on their cameras just because there's probably some level of discomfort in seeing themselves. But we beat them down mostly through just brute force by continuously turning ours on. But have you seen like a lot of people being skittish around being comfortable putting themselves in front of the camera?
I think there are a couple things, and people like our friend Marcus Sheridan have mastered this at many levels. And one of the things that Marcus says is, look, when you're going to use video, the rule is you can't stop and start over. You just have to go straight through. And I think when people say, "Oh, I'm not comfortable in front of the camera," okay, so are you comfortable with people? Oh yeah, I'm comfortable with people. Okay, well, and it just comes down to, we generally have discomfort in things that we're not familiar with. So it just comes down to more and more practice. and getting people comfortable with having that conversation. Because to you and me, neither one of us is like, oh, wait, this is via video, I'm going to be uncomfortable. But it's easy, especially for me, because I'm used to speaking in front of thousands of people.
Right.
And there's usually a camera somewhere in the room that's projecting an image of me that is, like watching King Kong in a movie. And so you kind of just have to deal with it and get over it. But the notion of, it's practice. It's just about, look, we're going to have this video call, no big deal. And if you give people parameters that say, here's the way to set up the background, here's the way to set up the foreground, here's the way to handle all this. In some cases, people can have a speaker set up so that the microphone, the speaker, the software, they don't interfere with each other, so you don't get feedback. In other cases, like, people will say to me, wow, I don't get any feedback. It's because I have an earpiece that's the same kind of earpiece that people use in studio production, and that's how I hear the audio. So I can hear you crystal clear, and it's designed so you can wear it for hours on end and be really comfortable. But that's the kind of thing that it just takes a little bit of effort up front to set it up so people are comfortable. I've also seen people where they get really uncomfortable to have something recorded on video. That's a whole other thing. I mean, I don't want to address the psychology of it, but for most people, it's just a matter of practice and comfort, and knowing that, look, you talk to people on the phone, this is the same sort of thing. You talk to people in person, same sort of thing. So I realize that there's no great risk here.
Yeah.
It's and this is, if especially for people in sales, look, if you're used to talking to clients in person, it shouldn't be that much different, unless you're like, well, actually, I talk to people only over the phone, and I've sent pictures of, like, me. Well, actually, grabbed a picture online of Tom Cruise, and I posted that, and now they don't know that's what I look like. I get that, but once again, authenticity is probably going to win the day, and setting people's expectations works fine. And let's face it, there are little pop-ups images you can put behind you. I've seen people where you think, man, they got the greatest setup ever, and then they publish how they do it, and they're basically recording stuff in a closet.
Yeah.
And they have some image that they've printed behind them that's like, an 8x10, or not quite, but like a small poster that's printed behind them, and you would think that they're broadcasting from the Taj Mahal, and they're really inside of a closet.
Yep. Thank you. What is it? Big Heads, Wall Monkeys, all those nice posters.
Yeah.
Throw up.
Yeah. So this, behind me, this is a wall monkey.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so, being able to just take advantage of space. And to your point, the biggest one that we've seen work really well is the practice with your team members. They're people you're used to seeing every day. And especially if you're working remotely now, you can pop up. There's no consequence to that conversation, but it'll get you a little bit more comfortable. You get a chance to practice with all of it. Hey, how does it sound? Do I look okay? If I turn my head, can you still hear me? And then once you have that stuff dialed in, turn it on, cut loose. You're going to find it's actually a lot easier in a lot of cases than the in-person meetings, for sure.
Well, and there are a lot of things that we do with your team where we all get on video, and I feel like we accomplish more in 10 minutes than we would have in an hour.
Absolutely. There's if once you start to get into the whole working remotely, there's the absolute benefit of productivity of being able to jump in and get right to it. And in some cases, there's an area we have to manufacture those, bump into each other water cooler moments, which is a conversation for another time.
And it's interesting because, for example, in the Same Side Selling podcast, the episodes are all recorded and produced in audio only, but we do them via video. So if all of a sudden my guest is going on and I want to interrupt, I just kind of do this, and they know they can stop. And if they're talking, they're on a roll, and I'm liking what they're saying, I'm like, wow, that's great. And they're getting feedback as they go along.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, and we've got Lauren prompted a question for us, which is, what are some steps people can initially take to start the alignment process? I can certainly,
No, go ahead. So start from your perspective and what you do in your business.
Yeah. So what was really interesting for us is, you had challenged me around that, and it felt, people talk a lot about, imposter syndrome or aspirational positioning, as it were. And so whenever we first started saying we work exclusively with organizations like X, Y, and Z, it felt a little forced, because it was like, as of 8 minutes ago, this is who we are. And so, I mean, you do have to define it. It has to, for us, certainly came from more of an intrinsic place. And then we started to break that out, but you do have to be able to lean into it long enough to make it a reality. And I can certainly speak to that more, but that was the first big part that we noticed.
Yeah, I think there's two things you have to look at. One is what's meaningful to you as an organization, and the second is what's meaningful to your clients. So, for example, if you said, "Well, look, our goal as an organization is to have the greatest impact on left-handed hockey players," then you might limit your market. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, gee, your clients, that may not be a high priority for them. But if you think about it, what you said in your business is, we want to work with businesses where it's important for them that they have a measurable impact on their customers, their patients, their members, their employees. Okay, well, the people who care about that are going to value what you do. People who don't care about that, not so much. So it's interesting for me when someone contacts me about speaking at delivering a keynote address at an event. First question I ask is, after I ask, well, what is it that led you to speak with me? It's, what are you hoping to accomplish at the event? And if they don't know and they say, well, we're just looking for a speaker, I know right out of the chute, I'm probably not the right person for them, because I am so hyper focused on results and making it measurable that if they're not, I'm going to be disappointed.
Right.
And I'm not going to be hyper engaged for their event. But the people who say, here's how we're looking to move the needle for our audience, and now I structure a whole program around how that's going to happen. Someone else comes in and says, oh yeah, well, I'm available that date and I can do the event. And the organizer's thinking, well, aren't you going to ask me what the results need to be? No, I don't really care about that. Right. So the idea is that you need to make sure that you've got things that matter to you and to your potential customers, recognizing that you might be ruling out some people who just aren't the right fit anyhow.
Yep.
It's just, now you know it.
Absolutely. And that was a big part of the journey for us. And I know other folks that you've worked with have experienced that as well, which is there's that polarizing effect that you start to see, especially once you've gone through the process of working with some people that are a really good fit. And there is that just full alignment. The work feels easier. It goes more smoothly. But the really interesting thing is, like, after the work is done, assuming you do a good job in what you do, is that those people are huge fans. Like, they want to go tell other
Absolutely.
people about the work that you've done. And that becomes a very virtuous cycle.
And I'm sure you've gotten this too, because we always ask people, what are the results need to be? What are we going to measure together? My guess is your existing clients you've done work for, if they reach out and say, hey, Chris, here's what we're looking to do, they probably finish the sentence by saying, and here's the way we want to measure the results of it, because they know you're going to ask.
You start to get that. Yeah, you can finish each other's sentences. You finish each other's questions, because every single time it's, all right, why are we doing this? What are we trying to accomplish? Let's carry it all the way out and then bring it back in. Absolutely.
In same-side selling, we teach this principle of the same-side quadrants, which is a method for taking notes. So in the upper left quadrant, we take notes about what are the issues that people are facing. The upper right quadrant, we take notes about what's the impact of the organization if they don't solve it, and why is it so important. The lower left, we take notes about what do the results look like. In the lower right, we take notes about who else is impacted or needs to be involved. And my clients know, and my clients' clients know, that they're always going to get asked those questions. And people will call me up and say, so look, here's when we're looking to do this training. Here's the issue that sparked it. Here's the impact that happens if we don't solve it. Here's the results we're looking for. Here's who else needs to be involved. Are you available on that date? I mean, they basically built their own concise business case.
Absolutely.
They're convincing me why they need to move forward. And it's the same sort of thing in any business, so that you're not the person trying to just push stuff, but instead you're serving someone else's needs. And it makes you feel a whole lot better if you're selling, knowing the impact you're having, as opposed to just selling effort.
Absolutely. And I mean, it puts you in that place where the client understands, hey, here's the value they deliver. They care about what they're helping us accomplish. I mean, that's been a huge part of the difference I've seen with the way we relate to our clients, especially over the last few years since we've implemented a lot of these changes, is, we get to be really big champions for each other. There's very little transactional sales. It just really fosters the right kind of relationship. And that's been huge. And I think maybe even as a teaser for if and when we get a chance to talk again in a public forum such as this, is helping organizations figure out where they want to draw the line in that balancing point between what does it mean for them to be who they are and how they align with a target audience, and how do you determine where that line is and how do you create that alignment and what kind of things do you do to test it and begin to narrow it down, I think would be a fascinating conversation and one of the ones that we were planning on leading into today, but we'll maybe leave that as a teaser for next time.
And Chris, keep in mind that this isn't about, oh, well, you get the results and you have to pay for them. If you're delivering measurable results that matter to your clients, they're probably going to focus a whole lot less on the price and cost instead of focusing on the value and the results. But unfortunately, too often, people who are selling, they don't give their clients a choice to focus on anything but cost.
Yep.
Because they're never selling and talking about value. They're just talking about, yeah, here's the effort or activity we're going to perform. Here's what it costs for that effort or activity. And no one cares. No one says, oh, wow, it was $250,000, but they tried. It doesn't work that way. But that same client would have been happy paying $300,000 for the results that they needed.
Absolutely. And that's, as we kind of conclude time, I think one of the big takeaways that people can think about is how do you have that conversation around pricing pressure? Because a lot of it is in, like you said, I think the salesperson's head where they're like, that's where I've got to come in. That's where competition happens. It's absolutely not. And in the Same Side Selling Academy, which we were privileged enough to help you build, you get a good chance to lean into some of those different objections people run into, which is, price matters most when you make it matter most. And how do you really build, your ability to speak to the value and the alignment you have with your clientele? And so,
absolutely. And in this world now of a global pandemic and things like that, you know what? Every once in a while, you stumble into the right opportunity where we're now all of a sudden getting requests from people saying, "How do we continue this education and support our team who is remote and can't all come to the same place?" And we have the ability to say, "Oh, well, we have this Same Side Selling Academy that can support you. You tell me." And of course, there's a lot of people right now scrambling. How do I create something like this overnight? And it doesn't happen overnight. It requires a little bit of effort up front.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, if folks watching, listening, want to check out more of Ian's wisdom, be able to get more of these kind of tips, and there's a lot more baked in, you can go to SameSideSellingAcademy.com. And actually, we have a preview code for you. So you can sign up for free. Just use the code YOKO1 at SameSideSellingAcademy.com/YOKO webinar. And there's going to be a form there. You'll get a chance to actually preview it, see some of Ian's discussion around various topics, both through, what you've shared in the Same Side Selling book that you wrote with Jack. And then also, getting into some of those objection clinics and figuring out how do you navigate those kind of weird, awkward things that sometimes come up in the sales process. And if you're not comfortable with addressing them in the way that you do to really bring about that alignment, this is going to give you a really good chance to learn and to share that knowledge with other people on your team.
Yeah, and keep in mind that people get this. This isn't like they go there and they have to buy something. This is they're getting a free preview of some of the lessons that are in the academy, and have the ability to interact and actually use the tool and get a glimpse of what's there.
Absolutely, yeah, it's totally free. And beyond that, if you'd like to follow Ian, you can find him at Grow My Revenue Fans on Facebook, /Ian Altman, and Grow My Revenue LLC on LinkedIn, and of course at Ian Altman on the Twitter.
I think in most cases, if people just look for Ian Altman, they'll get there. I'm surprised the Facebook one is still Grow My Revenue Fans, but I think it's pretty much Ian Altman just about everywhere. My guess is if you Google Ian Altman, I don't think anything else comes up for several pages. So
there you go.
I got him there too.
All the way down. Absolutely. And then most of you are familiar with us, but if you're not, you get a chance to check us out, or if you want to email any questions that you might have, especially for next time, if we get a chance to chat with Ian again, questions@yokoco.com. And then very excited for our next chat on April 30th. Ian's friend and mine, Hainan Landa, who is the founder of Optimal Networks. And we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of interesting intersections of corporate culture and technology, and considering everything going on right now, being able to leverage that technology and work remotely is more important than ever. So really looking forward to the conversation with Hainan. And if you want to register for that, just yokoco.com/webinar will get you there. And with that, I think we can say our thank yous, and that's it. So Ian, thank you again so much for agreeing to jump on, share some wisdom with us, and just everything you've taught me, both personally and professionally. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for all your work, Chris. Thank you.
You got it. All right. We'll see you all later. Thank you.